women's rights. Okay, right. So, if you're ready, I'll begin. Here we go.
Are you all sitting comfortably?
Oops, 1 second.
Ooh.
Who was it? Did you say that? Jack and Ori, wasn't it? Jack and Ori? And now it's frozen. But when I did the Friday night for the US, we did a test run beforehand to check all the bandwidth and everything. Oh, come on. Okay, it's coming. Coming.
Source 8.
Don't know where to put
Yeah,
it.
we're not up to number 8. It's got stuck. Ah, here we go. Right. Oh, there we go. It's there. Okay. Did everyone see that?
Yeah.
No, we've still got source. Oh, yes,
Oh.
yes.
Source 8. Ah,
No, it's
yeah.
got
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about human. Right. We're going to talk about human rights and the daughters of Tzlachad today. So off we go. Iris, when that comes up, over to you.
Right. Moses conveys the laws governing the annulment of vows to the heads of the tribes of Israel. War is waged against Midian for their role in plotting the moral destruction of Israel. And the Torah gives a detailed account of the war spoils and how they were allocated amongst the people, the warriors, the Levites, and the high priest. The tribes of Reuben and Gad, later joined by half of the tribe of Manasseh, asked for the lands east of the Jordan as their portion in the promised land, these being prime pasture land for their cattle. Moses is initially angered by the request, but subsequently agrees on the condition that they first join and lead in Israel's conquest of the lands west of the Jordan. The 42 journeys and encampments of Israel are listed, from the Exodus to their encampment on the plains of Moab across the river from the land of Canaan. The boundaries of the promised land are given, and cities of refuge are designated as havens and places of exile for inadvertent murderers. The daughters of Zelophehad marry within their own tribe of Manasseh, so that the estate which they inherit from their father should not pass to the province of another tribe.
That's those daughters that were given the extra.
Right. Okay. So, lots happening here. We've got the daughters of Tzlachad. Right. If you recall, this was in last week's Sedra. So last week's Sedra, the daughters of Tzlachad had come to Moshe and said, you know, why should we miss out? Ironically, their father, you may recall, the reason he wasn't around is he was the chap who was collecting sticks on Shabbos and he got the death penalty. But the result is he had no sons, only daughters, and therefore the case was going to be that the ancestral heritage was would not pass to them, basically. And they said, it's not fair. Why should we miss out? And Moshe said, you're right. We'll ask Hashem what to do. And the law was that the daughters inherit where there's no sons, right? Which is not completely equal, but it's they have an inheritance amongst the portion amongst the other heirs. And we're going to come back to that in today's Sedra. We have previously discussed the 2.5 tribes. It's a famous line that Moshe says, are you going to stay on the banks of the river while your brothers go out to war? This was used, we discussed, I think, last year or 2 years ago. It was used on a poster at one time about army service in Israel. But today we're going to talk about human rights. Human rights is a complex issue. You know, the world seems to be saying that human rights as perceived in terms of Black Lives Matter is so important that even though people are not allowed to gather in groups of more than 6, most societies have tolerated people gathering for the purpose of protesting. That's been socially acceptable. You could say they've had no choice, but they could have shut them down. So human rights is a big deal. So let's have a look at a few things relating to that. This is the daughters of Tzlachad, right? So they came to Moshe and this is what they said. Who would like to read? Number 2.
Yeah,
I'll do that one.
I'll read if you like.
Okay.
Let
Go on,
not father's name be lost to his clan just because he had no son. Give us a holding among our father's kinsmen.
Okay. So the phrase here is Lama Yigara. Gareya means to be worse or worsen. Why should our father's name be worsened, be lost, be cheapened? We find a similar phrase, by the way, with Pesach Sheni, when they came and said, why should we miss out? The phrase was Lama Nigara. Why should we have a worse portion, a worse lot than everyone else. Everyone else got to bring the Pesach offering. So this phrase Yigara is commonly used for that. Goreya is to be worse. Okay. And what does Moshe answer? Mark, would you like to read that?
Yeah, the plea of Zelophehad's daughters is just. You should give them a heredity holding among their father's kinsmen. Transfer their father's share to them.
Right. And you might recall, we may have mentioned this last week. If their plea was just, why weren't we taught it somewhere previously? So sometimes, right, it says that Moshe, the halacha was hidden from him. Sometimes we find that we had the same thing with Pesach Sheni as well. Interesting, it's the same language. But the people came to Moshe and pleaded with him, and then he taught them the halacha. So the question is, don't wait till people come and say, is there any way we can do this? Tell them anyways. The answer is that sometimes halacha is reactive, and sometimes things are grassroots. So there was a grassroots uprising, if you like, whatever. Not uprising, but a bit of pushback from Tzlochad's daughters to say, this is not fair, we're missing out. Moshe said to Hashem, they're right. Their claim is just. What do you say? Hashem said, they're right. And I will adjudicate their claim. And in fact, we will adjust the rules. And the phrase you find in Hebrew is here. You'll see why it's relevant in a minute. Kain. Kain means yes in Hebrew. Or thus. So, Kain b'no tzlachad dovros. They are speaking correctly, justly. Okay, it doesn't use the usual word for justice, tzedek or tzaddik, but it says Kain. They are right. They're correct. Kain. Kain can mean correct as well as yes. So Kain b'no tzlachad dovros. They've spoken correctly and justly. Now,
That's the name, isn't it? That one.
there's a problem, which Iris basically gave us the spoiler in her synopsis. And the problem is very simple. Every tribe had its land in its tribal portion in the land of Israel. It was very carefully divided, if you recall. It's in great detail. Now, what happens if somebody from one tribe is going to marry someone from another tribe? Until now, it was very simple. You went by the men. So they would hang on to their ancestral lands, basically, because their wives would join them. They didn't come with property. Suddenly now, you are giving property rights to the daughters as well. So what's going to happen if a bunch of girls from the tribe of Shimon marry a bunch of boys from the tribe of Reuben, and they bring their ancestral land into the marriage? Suddenly Reuben's going to own most of Shimon's land. That's not going to work, because then the tribe of Shimon won't have their ancestral lands. They'll lose their real estate. Right? So right at the end, Manasseh comes along, and he says it's not fair. Manasseh says, what are you going to do? This is not fair, because then if somebody marries someone from another tribe, then they will lose their ancestral land. And Moshe says, you're right. Well, no, actually, ask God again. God doesn't have a simple solution. The daughters of Tzlochad can have the land as long as they stay in their tribe and they marry. But if they intermarry with another tribe, then they give up their right to the land, and that way the land stays in families, going by the male line rather than the female line. So here's an interesting one. Let's talk about rights for a moment. The daughters of Tzlochad came to Moshe and said, it's not fair. We've lost our inheritance rights. Moshe says, I'll ask Hashem. He comes back and says, you're right. You should have rights of inheritance. So they're afforded rights of inheritance. Now you have a new problem. Isn't it a basic human right to marry whoever you want to marry?
Yes.
Have I ever told this story? I'm not sure. I'm sure I have told this story, and I'm not sure it was verified. About the chap who left some money to his grandchildren on condition they marry Jewish. It was in America, like a number of years ago.
Yeah.
So the guy left quite a lot of money to his grandchildren. I think it was quite a sum. But he said on condition they marry Jewish. They didn't marry Jewish, but they wanted the money anyway. So they went to court and they challenged the will on the basis that it was impinging upon their human rights to try to dictate to them who they should marry. It's a basic human right to marry whoever you want. The right to marry and start a family, I guess, extends to your choice of partner. Right? This is why the British government has a forced marriage bureau that tries to stop girls being kidnapped and taken to Pakistan or whatever, right? Okay, that's an extreme example, but the basic right to marry who you want, choose your partner, and marry and start a family is a basic human right. And I believe in that story in America, I believe they won the case. And,
Oh, yes.
and it was
But
thrown
that's
out.
infringing the grandfather's rights to leave his money in the way he wants to.
Right. The
Yeah.
problem is, what if he would leave his money, say, I leave this money to my grandchildren on condition that they are white and not black or Asian, right? So therefore, he's not telling his son you can't marry a non-white girl, but he effectively is saying, I'm going to use my money to dictate to you something which is arguably illegal, right? Or no Jews in my shop, right? It's that kind of thing. So you can see the problem. On the one hand, the grandfather's right to leave his money to whoever he wants. On the other hand, a will is a legal document and it has to be equitable in law. My own take on it is that if the story is true, it's a blooming chutzpah. Because whether legally right or not, morally, it's quite clear that the grandpa wanted his kids to marry Jewish and wanted them to have an incentive. So they want to have their cake and eat it. It's a chutzpah. It's a real chutzpah to take the money, whatever the law might say. But I don't know. Listen, I don't know. Anyway, I don't know if it's a true case or not. But here we have an interesting situation, which often occurs. Those who are what they call woke, who keep up to date with all the latest whatever, will know that you have this going on in society today, right? You have it with things like, well, you have it even with the Black Lives Matter versus COVID-19, right? You have it in America. People are talking about their liberty versus their health. So some people refuse to wear masks on libertarian grounds. Okay, you have it with sometimes a clash between feminists and transgender activists, because the transgender activists are saying that they want equal rights for transgender people, and the feminists are saying they want safe spaces for women. And ostensibly, they're all on the left of the liberal sort of part of the spectrum, but they're not necessarily on the same page. So you often find that different people's rights and causes clash. It's a common problem. It's all nice and easy when my rights don't interfere with someone else's rights. So like in America, the right of free speech is sacrosanct. You have the highly offensive scenario that the Westboro Baptist Church, which is an extreme, if anyone's heard of it, this is the church that organized rallies outside funerals of military servicemen who had died in battle in, I think it was Afghanistan, protesting the fact that because of gay marriage, God is punishing, or because of gays in the military, God is punishing them by killing soldiers. Right now, imagine that you're the mother of a soldier who's killed in battle, and you have to walk past some protesters who are being highly offensive. But First Amendment right in America is freedom of assembly and free speech. In this country, they'd probably shut it down on public order grounds, or they'd say it's insightful. In America, free speech is massive. Right? Even the freedom to say offensive things. You can even say the president, someone should really shoot the president one of these days. As long as you don't actually say, I'm going to go and do it right now, it's probably a free speech. A lot of hate speech, unfortunately, comes under the ban of free speech. So rights are fine when they don't clash. So my right to safety, my right not to be persecuted clashes with your right to free speech. We have it with Israel all the time. We are offended by certain things that are said about Israel. The people that say them claim it's their free right to criticize the Israeli government. There's a difference between criticizing the Israeli government and saying Israeli soldiers drink the blood of Palestinian children, which is something that was going around when I was a student, which somebody felt, no, I'm sorry, years ago, Cardiff High School, very nice school, bunch of Jewish kids, and there was a cartoon going around showing Israeli soldiers with cans with Palestinian babies and blood in them, right? So one of the parents who was involved with CSD complained to the school. You know what the response was? Can you imagine what the response was? It's legitimate political expression. It's not. Political expression would be, we don't agree with the Israeli government. We think the Israeli government is making the wrong decisions. To start using, stereotype, blood libel imagery is not freedom of expression. But this is the problem when rights clash. So the same thing in the Torah. Tzlachad's daughters are given their right to their ancestral land. But then there's also the question of, how do we avoid, you can argue whether it should go through the men or the women. The fact is it went through the men. So how do you avoid tribal lands leaving their family, which would be quite a big deal, right? Look, from time to time you hear about big celebrity marriages that break up and there's a big fight over the prenuptial, right? Because, the husband says that, I don't know, he's a footballer and his £50 million belongs to him. And the wife says, yeah, but wait a minute, when we got married, I had a successful business worth £2 million and I brought my business into marriage and I gave up my business to look after your kids so you could play football. So actually my 2 million from my business, when I sold it, really shouldn't be yours, it should be mine. And, they argue over whose property is whose, etc. It happens. So you can understand why someone would want to preserve, right? And if you've got a lot of family money and you're marrying someone who hasn't, chances are that someone in your family is going to say, make sure you have a prenuptial so that they don't take half our family jewels when you split up. So the same problem here. If you're going to marry people from different tribes, that's fine. But how do we make sure that we don't have an inequitable distribution of land? So Moshe says it's very simple. If you marry outside your tribe, then you lose your claim. Now we've got a problem. They're being denied their rights to marry who they want. How can you tell people who to marry? It's a clash of rights. Yeah? And we find the same phrases used, by the way. When the daughters of Tzlach had come to Moshe, the Torah says that they came and they said, Lama nigara, yigareya, why should we lose out? Why should we miss out? And the response was, Cain, Dovros, yes, they spoke the truth. They spoke justly. Let's have a look at what happens later on when Manasseh complains. Who would like to read?
I'll read that if you like, Rabbi. And even when the Israelites observe the Jubilee, their share will be added to that of the tribe into which they marry, and their share will be cut off from the ancestral portion of our tribe. So Moses, at the Lord's bidding, instructed the Israelites, saying, the plea of the Josephite tribe is just.
Okay, 1 second. Have I given? Yeah, I think that's the right quote. So you can marry who you like, but you'll lose your ancestral land if you marry into a different tribe, right? And the claim of Manasseh, says Moshe, Cain, Matei b'nei Yosef Dovrim. Again, the same phrase. They have spoken justly. But wait a minute, you have rights clashing here. You have the right to your ancestral, to an inheritance, and you have the right to marry who you want. And interestingly, there's a big gap between these. The daughter of Salachad was at the end of last week's Sedra. This business about the tribal lands and the wives taking it with them comes up at the end of this week's Sedra. So there's a big gap in between.
Where's the vowel in that word?
Sorry?
Oh no, I just can't see the vowel in that word.
Which word?
The last word. Is it?
Oh, sorry, it's not very clear. It's Dovrim. There's a dot above the Dalet.
Okay.
So it's the same phrase we've said before. Before it said Cain Dovrot, and here it says Cain Dovrim. So whenever Torah uses the same language, there's usually a connection there, right? So these are all dealing with people's rights. So it's an interesting one, the right to marry who you want. So in that American case, I don't think he wasn't denying them the right to marry who they want. He was just telling them, I'll give you money if you do dot, dot, dot. I mean, that's like saying, the royal family, they have to produce a male heir, and what happens if they don't, and so on and so forth. Look, if they don't, they don't, but there's an expectation. But this is often the case in society. They have a clash of, right, one person's rights is another person's responsibilities. South African friend of mine once said to me, it's a load of nonsense talking about rights, because rights mean nothing unless other people afford you your rights. In Russia, you could, it's that joke about the American who was talking to the Russian, and the Russian says, it was terrible back in the old days. They'd come in the middle of the night and you could be taken to prison. And the American says, that's terrible. Why didn't you call the police? Right? Well, it was the police. Yeah. So you can go to Iran and trumpet your rights to, I don't know, let's say you happen to be gay and you go to Iran and you stand and protest for gay rights, you're probably going to get executed. Whether that's right or wrong, unfortunately, that's the reality. It's always, I'll give you two examples. The classic one is, say you could leave aside like considerations of sneot, but the whole question of, if you dress in a certain way, you're getting, particularly say to girls, you're getting attention, unwelcome attention, you're asking for trouble, and say, no, you should be able to dress how you want, and men should control themselves and all the rest of it. The equivalent would be when I lived in New York, there was a time when they said to people, don't go out wearing your jewelry or watches because there's a lot of muggings going on. Now, are you going to turn around and say that's wrong? Everyone should be able to carry an iPhone in their hand and use it. Everyone should be able to wear their jewelry. Everyone should be able to, of course you should be able to. In an ideal world, you should be able to go down the street, dressed however you want. I mean, leave aside sneak considerations, and that shouldn't affect how other people respond to you. But the reality is, that's not how it works. And the reality is that sometimes if you get unwelcome attention, whether that's because you're wearing a fancy watch, or you have the latest iPhone, or you're wearing minimal clothing, then unfortunately, you may be a victim of crime. That doesn't make the victim to blame, but it doesn't help you if you're the victim. You're going to suffer. So if you go to, it's like people that go to Dubai and say it's not right that you can't drink alcohol, I'm going to do what I want. If you do what you want, you're going to get into trouble. If you go to Iran, you don't cover up, you're going to get into trouble. Sometimes you have to use your seichel. We can debate the rights and wrongs of it, But the reality is that if this is the situation at a particular place, use your common sense. Don't walk through that area in an overt way if it's a dangerous area. Don't choose to protest the fact that you feel you should be your right to wear minimal clothing or a fancy watch if you're walking through a dangerous neighborhood. It's basically the same principle. And then we say to people, you shouldn't have been holding your phone when you walk down the street. It's your fault. It's not your fault, but you do have to be streetwise. And again, we only have our rights to freedom if other people afford them to us, right? It's no good trumpeting, going on about human rights if other people don't afford rights to us. So my South African friend said it's not about rights, it's about responsibilities to one another. There's a lot of truth in that. You only have rights if other people afford them to you. And that's one of the problems, of course. That's one discussion about slavery as well. So we've got this problem. If you look at Bamidbar generally, interestingly, the book of Bamidbar of Numbers is very much about individuals. It starts off, the second Seder is Naso, right? Who would like to read that source there? Who hasn't read yet? Lisa, would you like to read? You're on mute.
Take a census, lift up the head of the Gershonites also by their ancestral house and by their clans.
Right, so at the beginning of Bamidbar, they took a census. And of course, this is interesting because, of course, we know we try not to count people, right? We say, I have not 2, not 4, not 6, because we know when we count people, there's usually a plague. But they did, they took a census. And the phrase in Hebrew is naso, and naso means to lift up. So why is the phrase, we think we talked about this in our shir as well. Why is the phrase for taking a census in Hebrew is to lift up? And the answer is because when you take a census, you are giving importance, you are elevating, you are uplifting the people that you're counting, right? My father had a custom. I don't know if anyone else does this, but in benching, when you say OCVS ish TVS, yeah, me and my spouse and my children, that he would mention my sister and myself by name. He would say Isaac, Mordechai, Edna, Elisheva. It doesn't work when you have 9 children; it gets quite long. But it's a nice idea, right? You don't just say. And if you want to get your kids to come for supper, you don't just say, hey, kids, come. They don't come. You call them by name. When you put a name on something, it gets the name of the kids in the class. When you go to parents' evening, the teacher says, who are you again? Right? Versus when you go and the teacher says, oh, Bear, yes, I know him very well. Right? So we like to put a name on things. So when you take a census and you count people, you say, oh, we have 3 people from this tribe. Very important. Yes, yes. Hello. Thank you for joining us. And 3 people from that tribe. It takes on a certain importance. Individuals are important, not just the number. Right? When you go to, I'm sure Michael's done this, and I'm sure Zach's done this. And one of the things they often do when you go to Poland and things, 6 million is a very large number. It doesn't really talk to people. You don't really understand what it is, but you start thinking about people's individual lives and you learn about individuals, or you read their diary, or the classic one, the story I always tell, where I went with a group from JFS and Carmel, and they weren't the most serious of kids, but when they were, my Danik has suitcases with names on them. When they saw the names of their family, Shapiro and Goldberg, they broke down. Because suddenly it's not 6 million anymore. It's my family name. That could have been my family. It's personal. It's individual. So a lot of Bamidbar is actually about individuals. It's about counting people. There's a lot about the psychology of individuals. We have Moshe. We spoke about Moshe saying, I'm ready to die here, if you recall. He said, I can't take it anymore. We had Aaron and Miriam criticizing him. We had the spies coming back, right, with their personal failings. We had Korach, his personal failings. We had Yeshua and Kalev, who came back positively. We had Pinchas, right? It's all about characters. Balak and Bilam, Gracious also is about characters, about our ancestors. Shemos is more about our national heritage. Vayikra is about sacrifices and serving God. Bamidbar is very much about the individuals, often about the flaws that led to all kinds of incidents. And right at the end, very interestingly, this is reflected in what Joshua says. What Moshe says to God. What does Moshe say to God when he wants him to appoint a successor? This is last week, etc. Right? Pam or Julian, I don't think you've read. Would you like to read? This is Moshe's plea to God. Let's see about this plea. Off we go. Yeah.
Moses said to the Lord.
Oh, sorry. 1 sec. Got rid of it. Yeah.
Moses said to the Lord, may the Lord God of the spirits of all flesh appoint a man over this. Oh, hang on. Can you go back?
Yeah, it's catching up. It's gone back.
Okay. Appoint
Sorry.
a man over
Yeah.
this community to go out and come in before them, one who will lead them out and bring them in, so the Lord's people will not be like sheep without a shepherd. Rashi, appoint a leader who will deal with each individual as an individual, who will relate to people in their uniqueness and singularity.
Right, that's Rashi on this phrase, God of the spirits of all flesh. What do you need to say that for? Just say God. The spirits of all flesh means who understands each person's spirit, each person's needs are different. Right? And I'm sure you've seen me quote this before. It's a wonderful, wonderful paradigm for leadership here. Appoint a man over this community to do what? To go out and come in before them. That means to lead from the front. Not someone who will say, right, you guys, off you go to battle and let me know when you're back. He says, I will lead you into battle. He will lead them out and he will bring them in. He will lead by example. Right? Leadership is about leading by example. Right? We know the rabbis have the same commandments to follow that everyone else has to follow. Right? In the Dominic Cummings world, that is highly relevant. We look at society today. Right? The importance of leadership are bound by the same standards. So Rashi says, but anyway, that's not even the point. Rashi says the spirits of all flesh means that somebody who understands each person individually. Emphasis on the individual. So that is last week's Sedra Pinchas, and that's just around the same time that the daughter of Tzlacha come to Moshe, right? They have a very personal problem. I guess most people had male heirs. I don't know. Maybe not everyone did, but they have a very personal problem, which is that they have this very specific problem. It's about their individual rights. And anyone who's ever had to deal with a difficult situation where you have to say to someone, I'm very sorry, but this falls outside the rules. Right? Sometimes courts, harrowing cases that go before courts, like, I don't know, where, for example, a couple have been together and they've frozen embryos and then they split up. And the man says, I no longer want to father a child with this woman. And she says, but I've had a hysterectomy since then. And basically, if you destroy these embryos, that's my chance of having a child destroyed. And the judge says, I empathize greatly with you, but the law is on the side, if it is on the side of your former partner. And judges have to make these kind of, decisions, which are not individual. They are based on principles, right? And to make allowance for people or to change the law is always a challenge. Along comes Salacha's daughters, and Moshe actually changes the law for them. It's individual rights. Now, interestingly, it's a shame Sally's not here because this is very much her I would say her thing. Who are these people who are having these individual rights? It's women. It's the daughters. Question. Who are most of the people that cause trouble that I just mentioned in all these parshas? What gender are they?
Women.
Men.
Sorry? They're
Men.
men. Right. Okay, with perhaps the exception of Miriam's Lashon Hara, but generally speaking, it's the men that cause all the trouble. Right? The women, you may recall, refused to give their gold for the golden calf. It was On Ben Pelet's wife who told him to stay home and stay out of trouble when Korach went out, right, and saved him. It's the daughters of Tzalachat who come forward and ask for their rights and their needs to be met. There's a wonderful, wonderful comment from the Kli Yakar. When it comes to sending the spies, God says to Moshe, Shalach lecha anashim, send for yourself anashim. Now, anashim could mean people, but it generally means men. Nashim is women. This is what the Kli Yakar, who is our Shlomo Ephraim Lunchitz, says about that. Who would like to read? I think it's only right that
I haven't read yet.
Yes, I was going to say, I think a female should read this. Go, off you go.
Kli Yakar, Rav Shlomo Ephraim Lunchitz, suggests that had Moshe sent women instead, they would come back with positive reports. Recognizing the justice of their cause, God affirmed their rights as individuals.
Right. This is the Kli Yakar on this. Two things got conflated here. There's two issues. So who are the ones that come crying for justice and for their rights? It's the daughter of Salach, it's the women. And the Kli Yakar says, if Moshe would have sent women spies, they wouldn't have had all the problems they had. Right? If the women would have done the job, they would have done it better. Very interesting comment. So obvious question, if that is so, why didn't Moshe send women? So if we look at the parsha there, God says to him, Shach lecha anashim, you will send men for yourself. So the Kli Yakar, and the rest of that comment, he says, God's saying to Moshe, you're going to want to send men because you think men will do a better job. Because actually, I think women would do a better job. They come back all positive and encouraging and, you know, feminine. But no, you're going to send men because that's what you do, because you think they make better, I don't know, soldiers or trackers or whatever. So God says to Moshe, Shalach lecha anashim, you will send for yourself men. I could tell you to send women, but you're not going to listen. So very fascinating comment by the Kli Yakar. Says basically the women in the background are the ones that stay out of trouble and often actually keep things on an even keel. Right? People often say, you know, women would have, if the women would have done the job, they would have done it a lot better. So here's the thing: society is not just about individuals and individual rights. When everyone does what they want, you know, in America, they've got, I still don't understand this. There's some cities where they're talking about, let's dismantle the police department. Oops, let's dismantle the police department. I don't know, to me, that sounds pretty scary. As much as there might be failings of the police service, I think we'd rather have them around than have no law and order. You don't want community law and order. It doesn't work. It might work, for example, in a community in the West Bank, an Israeli settlement of 100 families where everyone knows everyone and where basically people are decent and law-abiding and you don't have kind of delinquency. But I mean, honestly, I mean, let's take East London. What, you want to remove the police? That's going to make it safer? That's what they're saying in some cities in America. I don't even understand the logic. It's bonkers, but that's what they're saying. And just to give you a perspective, every time there's a blackout, there's looting, right? When the power goes off in New York, there's looting. That's how edgy people are and ready to, you know. So I don't think removing police is the answer.
Yeah.
Let's see what the Book of Judges says about that. This is from halfway through the Book of Judges. Iris, are we back to you? I think we are. Would you like to read?
In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did as he pleased.
By the way, the next part is it was a balagan. It was a mess. When everyone does as they please, it doesn't work. It might work in an orderly society where everyone's law-abiding, but generally speaking, it doesn't work. Not a positive. So individual rights, yes. Individual, you know, stand up for your individual rights, fine. But there's a bigger picture as well. There's society. Society is not just individuals, it's the collective as well. And we find, of course, throughout the book of Bamidbar, we talk a lot about the tribes. The tribes were organized, they were counted by tribe, they camped by tribe. So it's interesting that you have this juxtaposition of individuals, individual rights, but also group responsibilities. Very important, right? And you have the same thing, maybe not here so much, but you look at Israel, you have different communities from different places. Sometimes there are tensions. There are racial tensions even. But you also have quite often a sense, you have a Jewish state full of primarily Jewish people, and then you have individual communities. You have Ethiopians, and you have Russians, and you have Anglos, and you have French Jews, and you have Libyan Jews, and you have Yemenite Jews. They have their own customs, and they have their own communities, and they have their own shuls, but there is a collective as well. So our identity, we have an individual identity, we have a sort of tribal identity, a family identity, and we have a more global identity. And it's a balance. In a civil society, you have that balance. As I said, in America, sometimes that balance is quite extreme of freedom of speech. It's not the case over here. Right? In the UK at the moment, somebody was jailed recently for, what was it I just saw? Inciting something. It was basically offensive speech. We do legislate for offensive speech in this country. You can't just say what you want. And the challenge is always finding the balance of having a group identity and having an individual identity and having rights and civil rights and etc. And of course, the irony is that many times in history, Jews, or for that matter, blacks, did not have rights. You know, America now, people talk about the Constitution. The same Constitution was in force in the 1930s and 1940s when people had signs, no Jews, blacks, or dogs up. So it doesn't always protect people. Maybe it comes back to the point. Having a Constitution doesn't even protect people unless people are prepared to offer other people freedom under that Constitution. It doesn't work if people don't follow it. Right? It's like just telling people not to be racist doesn't work. You have to educate, and you have to do more than that. So coming back to the question, why does the Torah not just simply say the daughters of Selacha came to Moshe and they said, we want our property rights, and they were given their properties at rights, and then the children of Manasseh came and said, but this is going to mean that all our property is going to transfer to other tribes, and therefore he says, you're right, we're going to limit their marriage choices are going to have economic consequences. Why not just put all that together? The answer is it's very interesting because of context. In Pinchas at the beginning, it's very much about the individual rights to share in the land. In this week's Sedra, when they're told that if they marry outside of their tribe, they will lose their ancestral land, it's no longer about individual rights, it's about group rights. And sometimes group rights trump individual rights. And we have this problem in the West. We have this problem in society now. We live in Western countries where a lot is about individual rights and freedoms, right, versus group rights. And there's often a clash of that. And what we see from the Torah is there has to be a balance. Not every individual right trumps a group right. And not every group right trumps an individual right. It's a balance. And it's also interesting because they didn't tell them they couldn't marry outside of their tribe. They simply told them, if you do this, will be the implication. Right? They're not physically preventing them. They're simply saying that if you do, this will be the consequence. But basically, we see that there is this, this balance, even in Torah, between individual rights, which have a place and are very important, and particularly women's rights, which, as we said, the comment of Kli Yakar, which is said very tongue-in-cheek that the women would have done a much better job, and the needs of the group. So Moshe says, you know what, you're right. The needs of the group are that it's only fair that people hang on to ancestral lands. Otherwise, it's not a game of Monopoly or Risk where you lose all your ancestral lands. This was apportioned by the Torah, and this has to be your land for eternity, and we have to find a way to preserve it. And the Tzlachad's daughters could say, but that's not fair. You're telling us we can't marry outside our tribes. No, we're not. We're just saying that you can marry. Actually, you can marry who you like, but there will be consequences. Any questions? I think that's the last source. Yeah, that's the last source. Relatively short today. Any questions?
Well, it's like the police, isn't it? They only they put the law over us because we want them to.
Yeah, the police is an interesting topic because obviously this big story with this athlete that got stopped. Has anyone seen that story? Can't remember her name now. Blanche, what's her name? Not Blanche. Bianca, whatever her name is.
What, Jagger?
No, not Jagger. That's
the only Bianca I know.
Bianca. No, there's this sprinter. She's black and she got stopped in
Oh,
Vale.
yes,
and, I don't know the rights and wrongs of it. I was talking to a policeman yesterday who was very put out that the commissioners apologized. Because I did see two. I'm sure there is. I know there's institutional racism in the police. I know people who have been victims of it. This particular story, the clip doing the rounds was that they're in their car and the police women saying, "You got to get out of the car. You got to get out of the car." She said, "Leave me alone. Leave me alone." They don't tell you the preamble. The preamble is that they apparently were driving on the wrong side of the road, and they didn't stop when they were pulled over, and they had blacked out windows.
Yeah,
and it was part of a police initiative to stop all cars because of gang problems. Now the windows were blacked out, so they couldn't see what racial makeup of the people is. So the only reason they got stopped, it seems, from the footage is because they were disobeying the rules of the road. The police couldn't even see into the car. And if you actually watch the officers, considering it's quite a fraught situation, I think they're quite calm. And if you watch, when they say, "Do you know why we pulled you over?" that clip gets cut. But actually, the next part is, "We pulled you over because you're driving dangerously, nothing to do with your skin color." But they don't show that. So I have great sympathy for anyone who gets pulled over wrongly and whatever. But there's definitely something, there's a bit of, not fake news, but spin going on there. So this policeman was saying he doesn't understand why the commissioner apologized. They've, any objective analysis says that the officers did what they had to do, and skin color is totally irrelevant. They would have pulled over anyone with blacked out windows on the wrong side of the road who doesn't stop and been concerned and suspicious. In the other context is a lot of police have been attacked recently, so we have to let them do their jobs. So
why was it put on the internet anyway?
Well, everything's put on the internet these days. We're on the internet right now.
No, but what I'm saying is, why would anybody put it on the internet?
Well, she did it.
As the point was made, when you have an incident, the first thing people do is pull out a camera to film it.
Yeah,
that's what people do.
They video it on the phone and they put it on the internet. That's what
trial by social media.
Who puts it on the internet?
But my point was, people are very selective in what they put out there.
But is it the police?
No, not the police. No,
No,
the
the
bystanders.
couple, the black couple.
What, they put it on the internet?
Yeah, because they videoed it.
They want to prove their point. It gets worse
Oh.
because you have things like terror attacks where instead of going to help, people just pull out their phones. I mean, it's shocking.
Yes.
But anyway, that's another story. There are definitely issues, I'm sure. But what I find very sad is clearly at some point in time, I remember as a kid, we knew our local policeman used to come to school regularly. If you got into trouble, he would probably come around to see your parents. You know, he was the Bobby on the beat, PC Franklin. I still remember him. And then, you know, they stopped all the neighborhood policing, and that social contract, if you like, with the police and society is broken down. Add to that for most people, their main encounters with the police are when they get a speeding ticket, that society has lost confidence in the police. And it's very, very sad. Very sad. You know, it's not good for society. I don't know if there are societies where, in America, definitely, even worse. People have no confidence in the police anymore. If you don't have confidence in the police, you have a problem. You know? As I said in my sermon a few weeks ago, my first reaction to this whole Black Lives Matter business was, we don't understand what it's like to be fearful of someone in authority who stops your car or knocks on your door. And then my next thought was, we do, because you go back 70 years, and if you were a Jew in the ghetto, the absolute worst person who could knock on your door was somebody in uniform, right? And people that came over here in the 40s, survivors, they were very fearful of people in uniform. You know, they saw a police officer, they didn't feel safe. They felt threatened. So people in the Black community are saying, you don't understand what it's like to raise your child, that if you see a policeman coming towards you, first of all, he may well try to assume that you're armed and dangerous, and therefore possibly your life is in danger if you don't cooperate. Number two, probably assume you're committing a crime. So he's not your friend. That's very scary. You know, not a good position to be in. Anyway. Right. Tonight we're having a Tehillim group, 8:15 on Zoom. We do it from time to time at people's houses. Anyone who wants is welcome to join. I think the way it's going to work is I found a system called Tehillim Online that you basically sign up and you go to the link and it gives you a random chapter to say. And then when you finish saying it, it gives you Hebrew and phonetics. It doesn't give you English, unfortunately, but it gives you transliteration. When you finish saying it, you click the button at the bottom and it gets taken off the list. So eventually you do all 150. So if 10 of us all use that site, we'll say the whole Tehillim. I think that's probably easier than telling people what page is in a book. We'll give it a go and see. So whoever would like to join us, we'll include Mark's dad, certainly, and others who are not well. You can do it at your own pace, and we'll go together on Zoom. Normally we sit with booklets, but we'll do it all digitally. So I think
is it this Zoom identity?
Yes, same details. Tonight, 8:15. 8:15 tonight. Probably about 45 minutes, and we'll say prayers for those who are unwell as well. So please join us.
And do we have to sign in before or what?
No, because I don't think so. Because what I'll do is I'll just share the link with you. Hopefully you'll be able to open it, and that will give you the Tehillim to say.
Right. Thank you,
Yes,
Rabbi.
but I've got a question then. But isn't it an infringement of my human rights to be put on the internet or in the newspapers? You know, I wouldn't like to be in the newspapers.
It's a breach of privacy. You're right. It's a breach of privacy. So we forget. Yeah. So I should have asked everyone if you mind the fact that this recording.
Right.
No, I should ask people actually. Thank you for the reminder. No, absolutely. Oh. So by the way, these do go out on Facebook Live. It does mean someone can watch it afterwards. If anyone ever does not want to be on there, if you tell me, what I'll do is I think I can block you. Or I think if I go to speaker view, it just shows me. But you're absolutely right. People don't think about it. Big issue with children with privacy, right?
Yeah, no, but I can't understand why the people who like the royal family and people really in higher positions can't block out the press more. You know, because.
Well, one second. Let's talk about the Sussexes for a minute, okay?
Yeah.
1 minute they're complaining about the press invading their privacy. The next minute they're feeding them stories. Right? They would not be worth the money they're worth if they didn't have a image to cultivate. So I have sympathy for you. If you, Mark Cohen, were to say, I don't want the press invading my life. Let's say you're in the news for something, right? Innocuous, I don't know. Let's say you're in the news because you're a hero. You saved someone's life. And you say, I don't want the press waiting outside my door. I want some privacy. Fair enough. But if you called up the press and said, I've got a press release for you all about this story, and then complain, they'd say, wait a minute, you're the one that called us in the first place. So my issue with a lot of these celebrities is it's a load of nonsense. They love the press. They love the media. It gives them the oxygen of publicity. Just when the media says something they don't like, suddenly they start suing them. Right? And I think with the greatest respect, Harry and Meghan is a brilliant example of that. You know, they keep saying, "Oh, we're not going to cooperate with the press anymore." Of course, they cooperate with the press. That's how they get their publicity. You can't have it both ways.
Yes, but what you spoke? Why
And just
would
by
they
the
have-
way, interestingly, I'm not a big
Yeah.
fan of any of these. I've got no axe to grind here, but you know, they always said Princess Diana, particularly the way she was treated by the media, was very difficult, and she wanted her sons to have a normal upbringing. William and Kate seem to have managed to keep their kids out of the media quite successfully. They've been very strict about what they allow and what they don't, if you look carefully. And pictures of their kids and so on is very controlled, and they seem to have managed to control that, the narrative. So you can do.
Yes, but why would Harry and Meghan want to be in the press though?
You get money from it.
Yeah.
Oh, money? Are they getting
Your
paid for it?
No, I'm not saying they're getting paid for it, but your value goes up because you're a celebrity.
Yes,
You're
but-
far more valuable if you're going to go. If you or I go advertise something, it doesn't bring in people to the product, right? If Harry and Meghan go advertise something or endorse something or open a supermarket somewhere or spend a few days somewhere, then it's big news. Why? Because they're celebrities. They happen to be royal celebrities as well. So if they had no publicity, their image would be worth nothing.
Functions and things.
Yeah.
I've got to go. I've got a work meeting.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Lovely to
Bye.
see you.
Bye, Lisa.
Changing the subject, I wanted to ask you, you know, this film, The Balcony, that's
Yeah, I
on-
don't know too much about it. We've just been asked to promote it, but go on anyway. Yeah.
Right. Well, the thing is, we've got a third bar mitzvah we've been asked to go on Zoom. Now, is it going to be recorded? Can you
don't
join
know.
in?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. We were just sent it by the United Synagogue.
Yes, we have
Is there a
joined
link there?
these technical things. I can't remember what it's called. We have joined in one of them. I think you've got to give a donation, but I'm
Right.
not quite sure if you can join it later or go back and, you know, and watch it from the beginning. So I don't know.
I honestly don't know. It's the truth. Honestly don't know. Is there a contact anywhere for?
I have to have a look. I think
I'm
we've
just
just
looking
got
for
it
email
from
or
the
something.
Shaw thing. Yeah.
Also clashes with the ladies' session.
What
like-
is this you're
what
talking
ladies'
about? What film is it you're talking about?
Called The Balcony.
Balcony, yeah. From the
When is it and what is it?
It's not.
I don't know anything about
it's
it.
Shaw newsletter. It's a film. I think it's
haven't seen
about a
anything.
community in Italy that something happened to the synagogue and they wanted to rebuild it without the ladies' gallery. And it was a whole, you know, it's a sort of a comedy, and I have heard of it before.
I'll look in the Shaw newsletter. Last week,
Yes.
I'm not sure. Was it in the newsletter, Julian?
No.
No, it wasn't.
No.
Julian said it wasn't.
where
I
was
think-
it then?
I think.
I got it from the WhatsApp group, did I?
Oh, well, I'm not on
Email.
WhatsApp.
Maybe because we watched another one of those.
I had an email. Iris, you should have had an email from the office, I think, yesterday with it.
Yes,
Yeah, I think-
sure, it came through the show.
No, I didn't have an email from the office yesterday.
Oh, that's strange.
Yeah, a film to watch on Thursday did come from the office. I remember now.
Right.
But
Have a look, Iris. On
I'll
yes,
have a look, but
Yeah.
I didn't get an email yesterday
I
from the
think
office.
it's a film for you to watch on Thursday. I think that's what it was called. Have a look. Okay, I'll have to go into it.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have to pop to shorts.
There's a lot going on Thursday evening.
Yeah. Wait, is it Thursday evening, that film? Ah, right.
What else is happening Thursday evening then?
yeah, there's a
Common
lady.
sense.
There's a
All I know
ladies'
is
session at 7:30.
Thursday.
What? Where? I seem to have missed out on some things. I've tried to get WhatsApp on my iPad, but I can't do it because I haven't got a phone
Ah,
to.
Oh, you've got to have a phone. You've got to have
yeah,
your
you have to have a
mobile
phone.
number on.
Yes.
Are you on WhatsApp? I'll see if I can put you on WhatsApp.
Okay, will you excuse me? You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
See you at
Yeah.
Debbie's.
See you, Debbie's. Yeah.
Pam.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yes,
See you at
Brenda.
Debbie's at 2:00.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lovely. Okay. I've got Jackie Federman joining us.
Yes.
Nice.
Maybe 2:00. Yes, sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Bye.
Nice.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Mark.
Bye. Bye. See you tonight, 8:15, hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lovely.
Bye.